In Mali earlier today, the Prime Minister, Cheick Modibo Diarra, made this announcement on state television.
At this time of crisis, men and women concerned about the future of our nation want a calmed situation. It is why I, Cheick Modibo Diarra, resign with all my government today, Tuesday, 2012.
On Monday, Diarra was arrested by soldiers at his home, and analysts say this statement was likely made under duress. Diarra was installed as Prime Minister following a military coup in March. Unrest in the country is growing as rebels and Islamic extremists in the north continue to make gains. For more, we're joined by Dr Robin-Edward Poulton, Mali expert at Virginia Commonwealth University's School of World Studies. Welcome to Free Speech Radio News.
Thank you for having me.
Before Prime Minister Diarra resigned, soldiers arrested him Monday night at his home. Would you characterise this as another coup, and what were the grounds for his arrest?
The grounds for his arrest appear to be frustration, really. Cheick Modibo Diarra is a famous NASA scientist. He ran one of the Apollo missions. He was a Microsoft figurehead, let's say, in Africa after he retired from NASA. And he was also the son-in-law of a former military president, Moussa Traoré. So he is not an unknown quality. He's a sort of national hero who's never done anything. And when he was appointed, it was with that sort of hope that he would be a non-political political figure who would bring two things to pass. He would arrange elections and bring Mali back into some sort of constitutional process, and he would also find a way to get Mali united again, because Islamists and Tuaregs and Arabs have taken over the north and separated Mali into two. And he disappointed on all of those counts. He hasn't really turned out to be a clever political figure. He hasn't given leadership, and I think everybody was frustrated with him from the top down.
So do you think Amadou Sanogo, the leader of the coup in March, was involved in removing Prime Minister Diarra?
Oh yes, according to reports, he gave instructions to arrest the Prime Minister. And he's playing a very ambiguous role. It's not at all clear that he really organized the mutiny. It's rather that he was brought forward as a spokesman, because none of the corporals and sergeants really had any real mastery of the French language, for a start. And the official language of Mali is French. It's really a band of gangsters in uniform with weapons, more or less, but not entirely, controlled by Captain Senegal.
The Economic Community of West African States and the African Union support military intervention in Mali to respond to violence in the north and the growing power of Islamic militants. Where did Diarra stand on military intervention, and was this an issue behind his removal from power?
Well, it may well have been, but I'm not sure that Diarra stood anywhere, really. What we have is the French really lobbying to intervene in northern Mali to get rid of al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. The trouble is that the French are 10 years too late. They should have done it when the cocaine route first started 10 years ago. I think the idea of sending in ECOWAS troops would be very counterproductive. I don't think that any serious analyst really believes that it would be successful. Just imagine you have al-Qaeda-trained Arab Algerians in the desert, and they have a lot of weapons and they have a lot of experience, and some of them actually fought in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union years ago. And against them, you want to send in who? You want to send in troops of different nationalities, Nigerians who speak English and Togolese who speak French, who are ill-equipped to fight in the desert. It just wouldn't work. It would be a fiasco.
Government officials had been meeting with Tuareg rebels in recent weeks. How do these negotiations factor into the current crisis?
Not clear to me at all to what extent Diarra was really involved in that. These are negotiations which are taking place under the auspices of ECOWAS and the official mediator, who's Blaise Compaoré, the president of Burkina Faso, and they are ongoing. And you can see interviews with various of the Tuareg and other negotiators on YouTube and so on. Nobody's saying how far they've gone. But it is quite clear, I think, that the Tuaregs do not want a separate Azawad nation in the north. They claimed that they wanted it, but I think that was a negotiating position. And I don't think that the Tuaregs have any real illusions that, firstly, you can't run a state which is in the middle of the Sahara Desert, completely cut off from everywhere. But what they do want, and that is perfectly justified, they want a bigger share of the national pie. The Tuaregs are probably only 10% of the northern population, but they do have a lot of charisma, they do have a lot of weapons, and we need to listen to them. And some sort of federal solution is what will probably come out of this eventually.
The UN says almost 350,000 Malians have fled their homes, and nearly half of them are now taking refuge in neighbouring countries. How serious do you see the refugee crisis in Mali now, and what impact is this having on the drought-stricken Sahel region?
There's no doubt that the humanitarian crisis is disastrous. I have friends who fled their houses, and some people who've had their houses burned down. It's most unfortunate. Really, it's very, very sad. All the cities of Mali now have disparate populations come in from the north, so they are overwhelmed, really. And then there are sizable camps now in Niger, in Burkina, in Mauritania, and this is a humanitarian disaster.
As you've mentioned, military intervention in Mali is being discussed at the United Nations with support from the European Union and France for military intervention. But what do Mali civilians say about the issue, and is there support from people on the ground for this sort of intervention?
Well, Malian civilians are remarkably unrealistic, I have to say. There are a large number of young people, and if you read them on the internet, they're even more gung-ho on the internet than they are in Bamako, saying we must walk up to the north and recapture Mali. But what with? You don't have an army. They don't have an army. The best regiment in the Malian army was the parachute regiment, and that has now been disbanded by Senegal because there was a conflict between the Red Berets and the Green Berets. What you have in the north, on the other hand, is a range of armies. There's the ACMI, the Al-Qaeda army. There's Ansar Dine, which is a mixture of Islamists and Tuaregs. There's Mujao, which is a mixture of Mauritanian Arab drug smugglers and various sort of mercenaries that they've hired in. And then there's the MNLA, which are Tuaregs, many of whom came back from Libya. Eventually, some sort of negotiation will have to take place.
Dr Robin-Edward Poulton, Mali expert at Virginia Commonwealth University's School of World Studies. Thanks very much for talking with Free Speech Radio News.
Thank you so much for inviting me.